Okay, so hi everyone. Sorry for this. Miriam is with us on on a WhatsApp call via my phone. So I hope you can hear her when she speaks. So she's gonna start the meeting for now, and then maybe I'll try to figure out later how to fix the problem and have her on the meeting with us. So yeah. مريم go ahead جرب احكي بس اشوف اذا عم يقدر يسمع.
I'm gonna try and skip now. Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I apologize greatly for this technical problem. I had to leave the university where my internet connectivity is amazing, and I arrived home. We have an electricity cut and the internet isn't working. The UPS isn't working actually. Welcome to Lebanon. I apologize greatly for that. In light of everything that's happening today in the country, I think we're lucky to be able to make it on this webinar. So in the name of the Arab Institute for Women at the Lebanese American University, I would like to welcome you all to this first Food for Thought speaking series that falls within the activities we are organizing for our students and specifically for our LAU MEPI-TL gender scholars. So the Food for Thought speaking series is a monthly speaking series that we try at AIW to use and we initiated in our efforts to engage our LAU faculty, staff, and students by integrating gender issues through activism that leads to social change and that addresses current topics in gender issues. And I'm very pleased, I don't want to take a lot of the time that I already spent trying to connect. I'm very pleased that we have with us Diana Mokalled, Halimeh Kaakour, and Menaal Munshey. So Diana is the co-founder of Daraj Media, an alternative media platform that addresses everything related to alternative media, exposing truth, etc. And within the context of her work that she does, she's always been a gender expert and a gender journalist that addresses issues related to gender and the media. She's spoken about taboo subjects very easy for anyone with her program بالعين المجردة, at least on the level of Lebanon. Her program was regional and addressed very sensitive issues. She's also worked very closely on issues related to the personal status codes and has done films and documentaries on that. Then we have with us, and Diana is a very dear friend. Then we have with us Halimeh Kaakour, who's a university professor who has worked with us on very many issues, and she herself is a gender expert. She teaches at the university, at the Lebanese University, and also she's an activist that works on the ground to try and amend the registration of women. She is also very active in terms of women's political representation and is trying her best to counter all the violence against women who are running for elections and women who are in the public sphere via the studies that she does. She tries to fuse activism and academia. So she's done a study for UN Women on violence against women in politics, and she will be talking about the study that we've worked on, a very small one that needs a lot of population acquis in terms of like the raw data that we came up with is something that organizations can work on to basically continue and add the number, and it's on violence against female and male reporters. It's a very small sample and a very specific moment at the time of the Lebanese October Revolution. And Halimeh also is a very dear friend. And we have with us Menaal Munshey. Menaal is a PhD in criminology from the University of Cambridge, and she is currently a regional consultant and a gender equality and women's empowerment expert at UN-ESCWA. Menaal currently is heading the update of the gender justice report that ESCWA, UN Women, UNDP, and maybe others, I'm sorry, Menaal, basically spearheaded, that talks about gender justice in all Arab countries. And basically, she is leading the research initiative to update this. Menaal is a friend of a very dear friend and works with a very dear friend. Thank you, Stephanie, for suggesting her. So I will stop here and I will start with Diana, who will tell us a bit about her journey trying to counter gender-based violence and trying to expose that via media, previously via the traditional media channels and now via all sorts of channels that she have via Daraj Media. Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and I appreciate what you're trying to do, especially with the circumstances we've been through today. It was a horrible day. I hope everyone is safe. I'm Diana Mokalled. I've been in the field of journalism for almost 30 years. I've graduated in 1991 from Lebanese University, Faculty of Journalism. I started working as a journalist just when the war ended. Unfortunately, today we have seen another page of the Civil War. So it reminded me very much with how we started. So anyway, after the end of the war, as I started working as a journalist, all the burden I had on my shoulder as a woman in this world, as a girl, when I started, I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. My father used to work there. So since the early years of my life, since teenage period, it was visible to me that I am supposed to be different, that I am responsible for so many issues and describing all the injustices that women in the region are facing. So it was natural to me, with the background that I had, with how I was born and the traditional surrounding I lived through, to feel that this is the area that I want to focus on. In the 90s, later on 20, all that time. So to me, it was a natural evolvement as a person who lived in the region and felt all the injustices. And I will jump immediately to the conclusion, which is the personal status law. Why I want to jump to it? Because as I was working on early marriage, as I was working on violence against women and all the issues, inheritance, all the issues that summarizes every type, every kind of injustices against women in the region, Lebanon and in the region, I find myself as those laws are integrated within our society. They are very discriminatory. They discriminate against women, girls from different religious and from different sects. So I started focusing more and more on these issues. During my 30 years, I tried as much as I can to cover the stories, especially of those who have rarely a voice or a place to speak up. So I felt it was my obligation to tell the stories of those girls and women that I have met, and I was blessed to be able to transform or to tell the stories that they have. Because I worked in mainstream media, I was faced with so many restrictions, with so many ceilings, that many issues that you cannot tackle, you cannot approach. So I felt it after the revolutions, when we thought that we will have more open space as media, as independent media. Actually, it was vice versa, because the counter revolutions did not give us the chance to express rightfully the gender question. So in 2017, I managed with a group of founders to create Daraj, which is an alternative media, an independent media. And when I say independent from political affiliation. And one of the main core values of us is to approach gender issues, all right issues ethically and professionally. So this is in a nutshell. I don't know how much time I have. I know we have crossed the time when we started. So there are other speakers. I can speak more, but I would like to be sensitive to timing. Maybe can lead us if I can speak more, or I should give other speakers some time, and then we can have a kind of discussion. Maybe I will hand it to you, Halima, and we will give a space more to discussions later on. Thank you so much. I will leave it up now to Halima.
Thank you, Diana. I'm trying. Yes. You didn't take your 10 minutes, huh? So you have you have time if you want to add something.
No, I'm fine. I think we already started late, so I just wanted to give a highlight, and then we will keep it to the discussion. I would like to engage with people more than just
to receive the
lecturing.
question and to answer. Thank you, Diana. As Miriam told you that I'm a gender expert and I'm a researcher, so I'm trying with UN Women and with LAU to measure the violence and the discrimination against women in Lebanon, to tackle the causes and the consequences, and to find recommendations and reforms in order to be scientific and tackling discrimination against women, and not just being emotional and just being victims. So we are trying to find the right reforms within the Lebanese context, the cultural and the political and the legal. As Diana told you, we have many legal issues regarding not just the status, regarding many discriminatory laws. So I'm here to talk to you about the last study we did with LAU and with UN Women, because we tackled the safety of journalists, but with the gender perspective. So what we did during the first 3 months of the revolution, 17 October, we tried to measure the violence against reporters, female and males, and to compare the violence perpetrated against male and against female reporters. What we did that we contacted 4 TV medias, OTV, MTV, LBC, and the New TV, because they were present always and reporting. They were reporting October 17, and we had 9 females and 9 males, because always when I tackle discriminatory violence or violence against women in politics, some voices they told us that the same as men, we have the same problems, so there is no discrimination against women. So far, many of the Lebanese, they want to ignore the discrimination against women, to tell us that there is no discrimination, and men and women, they receive the same kind of violence. So this is why it was very important to compare between male and female reporters. Why the safety of reporters? Because the safety of reporters affects sustainable development, freedom of expression, intercultural dialogue, peace and good governance, and human rights. So protecting TV reporters is a key factor in protecting the right of information and the democratic values of society, such as diversity, public and individual freedoms, access to information, and others. So what we did, we tackled violence perpetrated against TV reporters from gender perspectives, the types of violence female TV reporters went through, impact on their well-being and their productivities in comparison with their male counterparts, assessing and measuring the quality and intensity of online violence against TV reporters, because we studied the offline violence and the online violence, because we had 2 phases. The first phase, the interviews with 16 reporters, we asked them many questions regarding the violence and discrimination. And the second one, we monitored the Twitter accounts of the reporters, and we compared and we classified the kind of violence they went through. So we had the qualitative and quantitative, and as a result, we can tell you that both female and female they need to be protected, but female, we have differences, major differences regarding the violence against women, the intensity and the type. Sorry guys. كهرباء so لازم امشي على بعتقد مش الحال. جربكم هون. So female reporters described encountering different forms of violence, and the majority of perpetrators were men. When we asked about the perpetrators, female and male reporters, so they told us that the majority of perpetrators were men. And let me give you some findings, some numbers. So regarding the physical violence, 100% of women, they were victims of physical violence. 50% of male reporters were victims of physical violence. So the difference is huge. But 100% of men and 100% of women were victims of verbal violence. So same, equally. They were victims equally of verbal violence. The sexual assault, 100% of women were victims of sexual assaults, but women 60, men 62.5. وبعد المسبات للرجال مش نفس الشيء، سو بسبوا امهم واختهم، سو بسبوا الرجال، بسبوا كمان المرأة. So it's not the same. When we talk about the sexual insults, it's not the same. And 100% of men were victims of insults against their TVs, while women 85.5%. شو يعني؟ يعني they were insulting men, not personal insults. They were receiving insults against their TVs, but not personal. But the female reporters, they were receiving personal insults. So there is a big difference regarding the two kind of violence. Regarding the sexual harassment, while reporting from protests, 5 female reporters, yani 62% of female were victims of sexual harassment, with zero sexual harassment regarding men. So I will tell you a quotation regarding one male reporter. He said, "I'm never attacked for the quality of my coverage, but for my TV station's political position. And that's very annoying." Curses were not personal. They were addressed to the TV station I'm working for, accusing it of corruption and bias. So women, it was different because they received many sexual insults. One of them told me they told her, "Come on, dance for us, a stripper." Mr. X, is your boyfriend? No, I know all about your life. No, it's sexual life. So one of them told me they followed me. I was not just beaten by coincidence. I heard some guys calling my name and shouting to follow me, and I was chased to a building, and I had there until they left. So she was blocked like for 4 hours, okay, in a building with unknown people, because she didn't know, but she asked help and she knocked at unknown people. Violence against reporters impacted women more than men. I will give you some numbers, some percentages. The productivity was affected, male and by male and female, but female reporters were more affected than men. So 100% of women were affected. The well-being of female were affected with 100%, 62.5% for male. They felt tired and anger with 62.5%. female, 37.5% male. Productivity of male was affected with 25% and female with 62.5%, more than a half. Avoiding some places to report. For example, MTV, MTV reporters, they were avoiding to go to some places. For example, 25% female, 12.5% male. Absenteeism, because they were obliged to take off, few days off, 3 months for example, one reporter. 37.5% of female were obliged to take days off, while 12.5% for male. So if you see the numbers, the difference between the impact on productivity and the well-being of the female, أكيد were more important than the impact on males. So, and who's blocking more accounts, male or female? Female were blocking more accounts because they were receiving more harsh attacks and more sexual attacks. 75% interviews of female were blocking big numbers of accounts, but just three males were blocking, but occasionally and not always. So online violence, I asked female and males, I asked them if the online violence is harder than the offline violence. They said yes, the online violence for both female and males, they suffered more from online violence. So I will give you some classification of violence perpetrated against men and women. We compared between offensive violence regarding the offensive comments and gender-based violence, women receive more attacks and more violence than women. Regarding the mockery, insults, and threats and incitement to violence, for both categories, women were suffering more than men. I will give you some numbers. Mockery لأنه بيتمسخروا دايما, they try to belittle women talking politics, to say that you're not able to talk politics. For mockery, 33% against female and 27% against male. For threat, 0.5% against male and 0.7% against female. Insult, 71% against female and 65% against female. And incitement to violence, we have also bigger number, bigger percentage against women and men. So regarding the gender-based violence, we classified it into 4 categories: stereotype gender roles, image pressure, sexual insult, and verbal sexual harassment. And in all these categories, women were victims of gender-based violence more than their men. I can give you an example. Regarding sexual insult, 85% against women and 51% against men. So I will give you some example. How much is he paying you per night? Don't play. we are confirming that we are not able to talk politics. This is for man. This field is for man. So stereotyping gender roles, for example, you are a reporter. Please just read the text and don't analyze. Stay the pretty and gentle reporter. It would be better for you if you stay in the domain of fashion and makeup. It's not your role. You were better before talking politics. If you had justice on earth, you would be in the kitchen, not a reporter. So leave Twitter and the microphone and focus on your housework. So many, many examples. I'm just giving you some examples. So this topic really is very important. We are responsible. We have the right to criticize. We have the right. The freedom of expression is sacred, is very important, it's one of our rights. But we have to remember each time we comment, each time we criticize, we do it with respect and without discriminating against women. Women and men have equal rights to be reporters, to talk politics, to express themselves. And we as women and men, we have the right equally to respond, but in politics, not tackling the image, not tackling the gender roles, not telling the women that she should stay at home and not talking politics. We are responsible. We have to give a good example regarding the freedom of expression, the right to criticize, and the right to defend ourselves and to defend our ideas. Thank you.
Halimeh, thank you so much. I apologize again for not being able to join. We had no electricity. The UPS was down. I'm very happy to be here. So basically
Miriam,
what you
I'm
said,
not
Halimeh,
listening.
is very...
لحظة.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Wait, Miriam. I have problem with my
Yeah,
phone.
I can hear you.
Because I got
Okay,
a
perfect. So
call.
what you said, Halimeh, is very important simply because we have upcoming elections and we will be faced with a lot of violations. I move now to Menaal, who will tell us more about the importance of issuing a report that addresses issues related to gender justice before the law, the importance of that, and the updates that she's coming up with, picture the plan around this and what this and working on. Menaal, you have 10 minutes on the floor. I will open the discussion for the students.
Perfect. Can everyone hear me?
The floor is yours.
يلا هلا اسمعتك. Sorry, Miriam. Could you repeat, please?
Sorry, Miriam, do you want to repeat?
We're leaving the floor to Menaal. She'll start and then we'll continue. Thank you.
Miriam, can you hear me? I just want to check if the mic is working.
Yes, perfectly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. So I'm going to talk a little bit about gender justice and why it's important. So first, starting with the definition of gender justice. So gender justice essentially is about gender equality, creating gender equality by ending inequality between men and women, redressing existing inequalities. And it's achieved by giving men and women the same rights, the same opportunities in all sectors of society. So that would include, for example, employment, whether you're working as a journalist or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it is that you might do, the care economy, how much of unpaid labor you're made to do every day, what the responsibilities are, whether they're shared between men and women at home, and then also public life. So it really covers, gender justice covers all aspects of life and also kind of your role in society. But it's a formal process and it's a substantive outcome. So the realization of gender justice relies on two elements, so accountability and equality. And that is in line with international standards. So the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Beijing Platform for Action, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and then the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So we know that without gender justice, development simply isn't possible because one section of society is progressing and the other isn't. And
in order to kind of stimulate this policy-making process, I think it's important to, we think it's important to document where we are in the region in terms of law and policy relating to gender equality. And therefore then use that so states are able to compare with other states where they are in terms of law and policy, and then kind of stimulate some kind of legal change. So the Gender Justice in the Law initiative started a few years ago. It's a multi-stakeholder partnership. So UN-ESCWA, UNDP, UN Women, and UNFPA are the partners, and it's on the regional level. It's on the regional level, so it's looking at the Arab states, 20 Arab states, and essentially it presents a methodology to enhance states' adherence to international frameworks, which is important, obviously, for member states, but also for UN agencies as well. And how we do that is through the publication of country-level reports with the aim to encourage policy and institutional reforms to enhance equal rights. Obviously, the overall aim kind of is to enhance equal rights and address structural barriers to gender equality. It's been a very collaborative and consultative process. So how it works is that we have a methodology of indicators, which I'll show you now. And the report is drafted by a consultant who's an expert on the topic. And then that report is provided to a multi-stakeholder meeting in each country. So the experts that are invited to in each country are government representatives, but civil society as well, UN agencies as well. And so they all validate the report essentially. So if there's been any updates, for example, or if there's nuances that we haven't captured initially, those are then kind of updated. So at the end, you come out with reports that are validated by each country. And also the process in itself is also kind of an achievement, because the process in itself develops like a debate. It also engages policymakers. It encourages buy-in from stakeholders. So it's also, I think the process also has a lot of value. So our the first reports were based on 29 indicators in the areas of constitutional protection, person status, nationality, labor laws, and sexual and reproductive rights. So as you can see, they're kind of quite broad. And we also have a color coding map, which then assesses the laws in light of these indicators. Now, the next year, what I'm working on now is updating these reports. So initially we had 5 sections, and now we have 79 indicators. So it's really kind of increased in scope. And we're looking at overarching legal frameworks and public life, violence against women, of course, employment, economic benefits, marriage and family life, sexual and reproductive health and rights. So each category includes indicators relating to the promotion and enforcement and monitoring of those rights. I'm just going to share my screen so I can okay, let me know if you can see this. So basically this was our first iteration. As you can see, sorry, I think the screen is going to be a little bit small, but it's all online, and I'm going to put the link in the chat so you can take a look at it at your own convenience. But basically, these are the indicators. These are the countries, and then they're given a color. So green if, for example, all the requirements are met. Amber if, for example, there are provisions, but they're vague, or and then red if there's just no provisions at all. So there are some key points that come out of this kind of comparison. It's obviously a very visual comparison. And essentially, for example, in terms of standalone domestic violence legislation, you can see that there are only 5 countries out of 18 which have standalone domestic violence legislation. You can also see that marital rape, for example, is not criminalized in any country. So where it's amber, it means that there might be some other provision that could be used within the penal code, for example, but it's not outright criminalized. You can see that abortion is legal or not criminalized in only 1 country, Tunisia. Polygamy also is prohibited in only Tunisia. And there are equal rights in marriage and divorce also only in Tunisia. If you come to, for example, labor laws and other kind of guarantees, so for example, maternity leave of the ILO standard, which is 14 weeks, is only available in 7 countries out of 18. So this kind of gives you an overview of the region where we're at, and also provides maybe some stimulus for countries to learn from each other and hopefully enact some kind of change. And here there's there's a description of, you know, why it's red or amber or green. So this was our first initial iteration, which was in 2018. And now what I'm working on now, which is not out yet, so this is very much in draft form. This is the new iteration. So we have 2 other countries that we've added, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which we've added. So now we have 20 countries. And we have 79 indicators. So in the areas of overarching legal frameworks in public life, violence against women, employment and economic benefits, marriage and family, and then sexual health and reproductive rights. So, and it also includes indicators for enforcement and monitoring. So it's not just about kind of the promotion of rights or setting the standards, but also how they're enforced and monitored. So just to talk a little bit about those indicators, in the first category, in terms of overarching legal frameworks in public life, legal aid is mandated in criminal matters in all countries in some form, which is positive. But in terms of civil and family matters, it's not mandated in 5 countries. So there's a big gap there. Are there laws that explicitly require the production and dissemination of gender statistics? There are, but they're only in 3 countries, not in the other 17. And that's important because as anybody who studies public policy or is interested in that, without data, it's very difficult to make data-driven decisions. It's very difficult to make policy that reflects reality. So I think the production of gender statistics is actually a very key part of any kind of policy making. Then in terms of violence against women, there's, again, sorry, it's so small, but these questions look at budgetary commitments by governments. So have governments made budgetary commitments to actually like operationalize violence against women laws? So there might be laws, but if you have not given adequate funding to those laws and related activities, then it's very difficult to operationalize those laws. So again, there's a big gap there. Similarly, some states do have an action plan, a national action plan to address violence against women, but it's not overseen by a national mechanism that monitors and reviews that progress. So it's not enough to kind of just have a national action plan, but there has to be monitoring and reporting and kind of a reviewing process. So the indicators, as you can see, are quite broad. For example, here is childcare in terms of employment and economic benefits. Is childcare publicly provided or subsidized? It is only publicly provided or subsidized in Jordan and not in the other countries. So you see that it's quite, I mean, these are things that affect women's daily life in many different aspects. This is our website, which you can kind of explore at your whenever you wish, and I'll put the link in. I'll put the link in the chat. Apart from that, I just wanted to mention like a few implications of why this is important. So the Arab region, 37% of women in the Arab region have experienced some form of violence in their lifetime. 1 in 5 girls are married under the age of 18 in the region. Labor force participation is extremely low, 18.4%. compared to 77.2% for men. As the other speakers discussed as well, it's not that there are gendered impacts of professions, there are gendered impacts of, for example, COVID-19 as well. And I think that has exacerbated many of the problems that we saw before. But I think without gender sensitive legal frameworks, women's vulnerabilities are heightened. And without robust social and legal frameworks, very difficult to demand accountability. So that's really where the project also fits in and where the concept of gender justice becomes so important. States have clear obligations under international law to enact legislation of this kind, but of course, as we can see from the chart, it's not followed through, and where it is followed through, it might be done in a piecemeal kind of way. So over the past 2 decades, there has been a lot of progress in the region. However, we hope that with initiatives of this kind, with more academic research as well on this topic, and with more policy-oriented research as well on this topic, the significant gaps that remain can be addressed. And regionally, we can move forward and push for accountability and equality and justice within the legal system and within society at large. So that's all that I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Menaal. So as we saw, the importance of like fusing everything related to data collection and the importance of like having this data accessible to people like students who would use it in their research, to journalists who will use it in the work that they do in terms of pushing for gender justice, etc., and in the activism that is done on like in actual life, to try and push for and sensitize people to the importance of gender issues in general and why gender matters. And I'm sure Lina is actually doing that in theory and even in practice for you in terms of the activities and the case studies and in terms of the articles that you're reading. So you have three experts here. I will take the liberty of asking them three questions, and I want very short answers, and then I will stop and like leave the floor for the students to ask the questions in the chat box. So Diana, we know that you've worked on very many Arab countries, and we know that you've worked on very many thematic areas. And because I know your work and I follow you, I know that according to you, if you don't address issues related to personal status code, and if you don't stop from the home, you cannot go out and do anything related to that. Can you talk more about why the subject is important, and very briefly on the films that you've worked on whereby you showcase this and how you believe this has value on the ground? And did you use like the importance of research and the importance of media together and fusing them?
Thank you, Miriam. The thing is that I started working on women issues by topic. First of all, I didn't start working on personal status laws from the beginning. I started working on the so-called crimes of honor. When you work on crimes of honor, you will be faced by terms at different laws that justifies killing women by the sake of honor. That's according to personal status law. If you go to early marriage, which is still something that you need to debate with certain religious leaders, and they disagree if we want to have the minimum age of marriage as 18, because they attribute it to religious reasons sometimes. So debating and facing all the injustices separately that women are facing in Lebanon and in the region will lead you directly to the personal status law. I started working, as I said, violence, a certain story or certain reportages on violence, other stories on early marriage, other stories on inheritance. But I found that the big elephant in the room was the personal status laws. And if you look at the women movement in Lebanon, some because they didn't want to confront the sectarian political elite, they chose to work by piece. Instead of addressing the personal status laws, they said, okay, let's work on a nationality law, where women can grant their children the nationality if they are married to non-Lebanese. But it's also of the core problem. Unless we have a law that deals with women equally and look at them as equal citizens, we will not be able to overcome problems like early marriage, like violence, like other, etc. I'm not saying that these problems have been addressed and solved in the Western laws, that you can use them to help women who are. You hear me?
Diana, I think it's
you. You can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but not very well.
Okay, I will stop the video. Okay, I stopped the video. Is it working now?
Better, much better.
Okay, in a nutshell, I think now we should really address personal status law laws rather than moving around and talking about issues separately. It really sums all the injustices that are exercised upon women by these laws. So to me, after the accumulation of my expertise and the years I worked on, that's why I chose in the latest years of my career that this is the focus and this is what I'm going to be focused on.
Okay, thank you, Diana. And I have to salute the efforts that Daraj and Kafa did in terms of moving the discussion from closed circles into screenings and talks on the streets in Beirut at the time of the revolution, whereby you talk to lay people about the importance, not just people who are interested and people who actually attend the events, but lay people about the importance of amending the personal status code. And I think there's a lot of value in that. Halimeh, you've worked a lot on violence against women in politics, and we know that your colleague here who's sitting here, Diana, has been violated against and has undergone a lot of violence against a lot of violence in terms of her opinions, and there are hashtags against her. Over and above that, you have undergone a lot of violence yourself, being a person who is politically active, member of an alternative political group that has no affiliation whatsoever. So can you tell us a bit about and very briefly about violence against women in the public sphere, and how you personally were affected by that, and how do you counter that for students to know? You're not just doing research about it, but you're living it yourself.
Yes, let me give you first some percentage regarding my first study with UN Women, because 75 candidates, women candidates, they were suffering from violence against women in politics with percentage of 78%. So no, 79%, almost 80% of female candidates were victims of violence against women in politics. So we are not equal, men and women, talking in politics, because we have many stereotypes against us. Sorry, guys.
Miriam, I think you're muted, so we can't hear.
Sorry, I never get the hang of this ever. Never.
Yeah, sorry, I had a problem with my dog. So
Okay.
So yes, yes, they want to tell us, to intimidate us, and really try to shut our mouths because we are women. So it's very tough when you talk politics and they respond talking about their personal lives and about your image and about everything, but not politics. So this is why we need to talk politics, guys. We need to receive critics and to receive many ideas regarding our speech, our political speech. So this is why the problem is big, it's huge. We have a cultural problem, social and cultural. We have many stereotypes against us, especially in politics. We have a political problem because our system, our confessional system, is patriarchal one. So it's not democratic. This is why we have many problems. We have the economic system is not providing justice equity. So this is why, and we have problem here. We have problem with our educational system. We have problem with our TV media. We have really a big problem with all with number of NGOs, because some NGOs are affiliated with political parties and they are with state feminism, and this is not real feminism. This is they are just talking about some fake feminism and fake participation of women. So we have many cumulative problems. We have legal problems regarding the discriminatory laws and the legal personal status law, and one of them. So this is why we have layers. We have problem. We need to tackle them one by one, and we need to tackle them all at the same time. So this is why we need to measures the same. It's not when they insult me sexually. It's not really just this. It's an army. It's an organized army by political parties. Those political parties patriarchal too, so they are not spreading awareness regarding women in politics inside their parties, their political parties. So this is why, and we have, because this political party is not democratic, so they are not believing in democracy and our right in criticizing. So it's like we cannot criticize. We can receive.
Yeah, and hence stems the problem of us discussing it, talking about it, especially to the agents of change who are in this room, our students. So I will move to Menaal and ask you something. I know that you're updating the whole gender justice reports from all Arab countries, but can you give us maybe some recent updates or some observations based on Lebanon and maybe other countries? We know that Tunisia now had a woman prime minister. We know that in Iraq, women managed to like succeed in a large number, etc. Irrespective if they're holders of feminist agenda or not, this is a whole other discussion as well. But maybe we restrict ourselves on the level of Lebanon. Like, what are your observations based on the updates that you're working on? Or maybe not necessarily Lebanon, if there are no updates, but maybe other countries also briefly, so we leave space for students to ask.
I think in terms of Lebanon, in terms of lawmaking, there have been some positive elements. So for example, the sexual harassment law came out in 2021 this year. That was positive. We're also working with UNFPA and the National Commission of Lebanese Women to operationalize the sexual harassment law. So again, like as I mentioned earlier, it's not enough just to have the law, but really we have to operationalize it. There were updates to the to Law 293 on family violence, so that's a positive thing, that in terms of divorced women as well, now it covers that. So there have been some positive movements. Lebanon has an action plan in terms of a national action plan on women, peace and security. That's also positive. But I think the really negative thing is in terms of the new cabinet and the new government and the fact that there is almost no representation of women at all. So in some ways, I think Lebanon is really regressing, which is very depressing considering the very important kind of feminist movement that was part of the revolution, and that continues and has been continuing for so many decades now. So I think that is quite depressing, that in terms of like the public life, women are not represented enough. However, in terms of the judiciary, for example, more than 50% of women in civil judges judges in civil courts are women, so that's positive. But again, in terms of personal status courts, there is zero female judges. So so I think there's again, it's not enough just to have women in positions of power, but I think it is important to include women in decision making and hope that they have a feminist agenda, or kind of instill this feminist agenda within the larger societal debates. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm going to await questions. Lina, I know that you're with us. I can't see any questions. Okay. So Menaal shared the Haita. Send your questions here. So for those students who are participating, excuse me, do you have any specific questions for Diana, Halimeh, or Menaal, or general questions that they can answer? I can't see any questions.
Yeah,
Lina, are you
seems to be any questions.
Okay.
Sorry,
So
this is me just confirming that I don't see any questions as well.
Thank you, Halimeh. So thank you all for joining. I agree in these very difficult times. Thank you, panelists as well. I know that Diana is following the news left, right, and center because this is her bread and butter. So thank you, Diana and Halimeh and Menaal, for joining. Okay, thank you, Dr. Halimeh, for calling out fake feminism. I know the students have many questions, so I wish they can send them here, Lina, in the chat. Anyway, like to try and like encourage them to ask. I'm gonna say that you can always contact Diana or Halimeh or Menaal if you need any questions, or if you want to help out in any, or write anything maybe for Daraj, or help out Menaal in terms of research for the report. So anyone who's interested in gender issues and has an interest in working with experts, we can try via Lina, of course, and I to put you in contact with them and see how you can help them to basically.
We always need interns, honestly, at ESCWA, and a lot of the work is to do with gender justice. So please, if anyone wants to apply, please apply.
Okay, on the level of the institute, of course, the outputs that you have via the project and this course with Lina and the papers that you submit could be published in Al-Raida if chosen. I'm sure Lina told you that. Okay, so Jana put the link to Daraj. Okay. Many thanks for this insightful webinar. There's nobody who's interested in asking anything. I guess maybe they're tired. So Lina, you want me to? Okay. Students have watched your CAFA video, Diana. Perfect.
So there's
Okay,
Melody who has a question. Melody, do you mind typing the question, please?
Perfect. Okay. So Diana would love to discuss it with you. Perfect. So maybe Diana could be hosted in one of those classes if they can drill her for all her knowledge.
Would love to. I understand that today was difficult for everyone. Maybe it's not the right time to have deep discussion, but I would love to discuss more and in depth the issue of a person status laws.
We're hoping to bring on CAFA on board as well, talk about their plan, their proposal, etc. So maybe yes, definitely we can do that. So Halimeh, there's a question to you. Can you please explain a bit about fake feminism? And maybe Diana, if you have anything to say, or Menaal, please, you can interject as well. But I'm assuming this was raised by Halimeh. تفضلي Halimeh.
Yes, thank you for asking this question because it's very important to talk about state feminism. State feminism is about dictatorship. Let me give you an example. Any dictator can decide to bring women on board and not give them real. So this is not what we want. Just tackling quota as the only solution is not the only solution. Chiefs, the non-democratic chiefs, who exist in Lebanon, they can bring from their political without giving them a real decision making. So this is not feminism I want. This is not the political women participation I want. I want to replace the chief will by internal democratic procedures that precise that side is coming on board. Chief should not decide who's coming on board. فهمتوني؟ يعني الزعيم بيقول انا بدي احط 30% نساء، المشكل مش انت اللي بتقرر. internal procedures, democratic procedures within your own party decide. So this is why really we need women on board. We need to work on real democratic political parties and new political parties. We need to reform the traditional one in order to stay on board. Otherwise, they cannot stay on board. Because we need women, men. We need to compete with projects. I have my project, so I need to compete with you based on my project and your project, argument and counter argument, and not based on persons and on chiefs. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Halimeh. Can I add something, Miriam, to the fake feminism issue?
Of course.
Fake feminism. I will give this example related to two issues. Lebanese women not being able to grant their children the nationality and the marriage thing. If you look at women who are represented in official sectors, maybe the Committee of Women, and also in the Parliament, we look at the how are they. I will give an instance. Claudine Aoun, the daughter of the president, is strongly behind the early marriage, lifting the early marriage age to 18 years, because her party does not object that, because it does not affect them on a sectarian perspective within the Lebanese politics. But they object very much Lebanese women granting their nationality to their children, because it affects their political agenda, and it will bring more Muslim children to Lebanon, and that is against their agenda as political party. Here you have a conflicting approach to women's rights and equality. On the other hand, if you look at some Muslim parties, if you look at Al-Mustaqbali approach, they are with women granting nationality to their children, and they are in favor of this draft law. But at the same time, they're very much hesitant in approaching the early marriage and lifting the early marriage to 18 years, because they will be also having some confrontational issues with their religious leaders. So here you have two parties represented by women within official circles, but they don't have an equal approach and a genuine approach when we talk about women issues. If we don't look at women issues as a general thing, as a real principle of having equal rights, then we will not reach anything. So to me, this is really a poisonous official feminism when they claim that they are behind women's rights, but it has to apply to their own political agenda.
So yeah, can I add something please to Diana, because I agree with her. So always we cannot be selective in human rights in general and women's rights. They are interrelated, they are indivisible. So we cannot say that we are with this right but against this right. This is against the philosophy of a human rights, because the human rights are universal, interrelated, and divisible, guys and ladies. So this is why no, real feminism doesn't select the rights and doesn't oppose other rights. Thank you, Diana.
Sorry, Menaal, would you like to add anything before I add something?
Yes, just one comment. I think feminism has to be intersectional. I think you have to not just focus on the inequality of gender, but also on other inequalities, as the other panelists mentioned. So I think it's very important. A fake feminism essentially is feminism that is not intersectional, that just believes that I should be equal, but someone doesn't look like me or doesn't have the same status as me should not be equal, whether they're a woman or not. So I think it's important to kind of push that intersectional feminism agenda much more than just the broader kind of agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, and here is the value of the feminist demands that were raised at the time of the revolution. They were very intersectional, everything related to shunning marginalized groups from the equation and talking about only rights of the privileged was no longer viable. There were talks about granting the nationality, the quota system, amending the domestic violence law, migrant domestic workers, and the horrible way in which they are treated via the kafala system, everything related to sexual reproductive health and rights, refugees, the LGBTIQ community, etc. So definitely I reiterate the importance of intersectionality in terms of gender rights. Of course, on the level of human rights being indivisible, of course, it's not a basket where you can pick and choose things. Those are rights that are basically inalienable and they need to be intersectional. I agree. On the level of state feminism and real feminists who are actually activists and it's their bread and butter, this is the situation in all the Arab regions. Unfortunately, we basically suffer from sometimes the need to appear modern on the international scene, the appear to use token women to fill in seats that are not holders of a feminist agenda, and refuse anyway to discuss anything that's beyond the parameters of their political parties, etc. On the level of the National Commission for Lebanese Women, the National Commission is an advisory group and has no authority in terms of like implementing things. They only advise. And if I'm not mistaken, Diana, recently they've spoken about the nationality as one of the thematic areas that they want to talk about. But I agree with you all that on the level of state feminism, there is shying away from discussing personal status codes, nationality, simply because it intersects with issues related to, in general, related to the state, the LGBTIQ community, simply because of the fact migrant domestic workers, because the contracts that are done via the government, etc. So there is an important way, especially with you students working on research. Maybe those are possible thematic areas that you can delve more into to investigate the whole circle, and how can you break from devising human rights and the importance of intersectionality. I will move to Diana. There's a question for you, but I think there's a typo in it. So how do you feel with flags from the government when you try to be vocal about gender inequalities and personalities and personal, they mean status laws as a journalist? How do you feel with fake, with, I don't know what flags mean. Can you,
me too. I don't.
But maybe they're trying to ask, you know, when you're vocal, you get pushback. And how do you, as a journalist, I'm assuming, like, fight that and counter that?
I mean, as a media person, as a journalist, can you hear me?
Diana, you're breaking up. Can you try and talk again? Diana, are you disconnected? I think she might be disconnected. So we have a question that says, pro or against legislated quotas? If approved, will they not be used to assign token women to political seats? I think all of you can answer those. We can start maybe with Menaal, and then we hope Diana can reconnect.
Miriam, قطعش الخط. Sorry. Can you repeat the question, please?
So what Nadine is asking is, are you pro or against legislated quotas? And if the quota is approved, she's asking, will they not, or will the quota not be used to assign token women to political seats?
Yes, I'm sure I'm with gender quota, and it should be, it's one of the special temporary measures that we need in Lebanon to increase women in politics, the number of women in politics. But we need gender agenda too, guys and ladies. So we need gender aspect in all public policies. We need gender aspects in all legislations. So it's not just about, it's one of the solutions, it's not everything, because we need a number of women and we need the quality and we need the gender aspect.
I can. I agree. I agree with what was just said. I think, yes, the UN position certainly is that there should be gender quotas on a temporary basis. I think it's important for women to be represented in the first place. It's important to have women's voices in parliament, in decision making. It's important to work with women to feminism. Is not just about having a percentage also having a percentage of names on the candidate list. So it really goes much beyond just having a certain percentage of women in parliament. So you have to have a percentage of women on candidate lists. Otherwise, the candidate list should be rejected. You should also have a percentage of women in every level of government. So beginning with municipalities, going higher. So I think it's important to talk about the quota, but how you operationalize that quota is quite comprehensive, and that's also very important.
Yeah, and I need to add over here that the issue of gender quotas has always been an issue that unifies the women's movement and doesn't devise it like personal status quotes since women got the right to vote up until now. Unfortunately, women in Lebanon have been promised throughout that this quota will pass. Like the gender quota will be applied. In a country that's obsessed with quotas, we have quotas for everything. I don't know why this is still an issue in terms of like basically exactly as Halimeh said, reserving seats and then removing them when the system is more egalitarian, like a lot of other Arab countries. And token women, Nadine, will come anyway. So traditional political parties would use token women anyway. So on the level of gender quotas, even when I'm going to give you a quote from a lawyer that I used to love, and I was very fortunate to work with, who was responsible for the amendment of very many laws in Lebanon. Her name was Laura Mayezen. She used to say, change does not come overnight. So basically, we try and we try and we try to change things. Step by step, things will eventually change. So where we are now and what we've achieved very slowly on the level of gender rights is so much better than before. We managed to remove a lot of clauses that are discriminatory. It's true, maybe the violence against women law was not the ideal law, the sexual harassment law is not the ideal law, but each and every time there are amendments whereby they give us piecemeal gains in terms of, take this and deal with it, or like accept it, etc. So what I'm indirectly trying to say is that change will not happen overnight for sure. And definitely the quota and having political seats for women is very important. And of course, we need women and men who are holders of a feminist agenda. And we need you to basically continue the fight via the university councils that you join, via pushing for gender equality and taking what Lina is teaching you in class and applying it on the ground, working with organizations like ESCWA, like doing research on the subject and trying to basically live your life in line with being egalitarian and like upholding gender justice principles. I don't know if you have any more seats. I think I need to wrap up. It's 7, it's late. Diana got disconnected. I don't know if she texted me, but I really appreciate her joining, because I know that as a result of the political situation, she's a journalist and she hasn't been able to do her work and tweet and do her activism for the past 2 hours. So she's typing something. Anyway, internet is very bad. Thank you for having me. So Diana says, hi, if you need anything, I will share with you her email. Menaal, thank you so much. And I'm glad the students have your email here so they can reach out. Halimeh, thank you so much as well. Maybe we can use those students to work on more journalists being violated and to start a project related to violence against women in politics now that the elections are in March, etc. So thank you all for joining. Lina, thank you for all your efforts. And exactly. So we will see how we can basically use the free hands that are available. Halimeh, do you want to